Hello everyone, welcome to MCM 345 Social Media and Digital Strategy. This is our first class, and we're going to spend some time getting familiar with the course. What we'll be learning in this class, how is the class organized, and what you can expect from the lectures, exams, and projects. And after that, we're going to move into our first topic and start building the foundation for the rest of the semester. So let's get it started. Alright, so I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what this class is actually about. At the broadest level, this class is designed to help you gain some knowledge and skills needed to develop effective digital communication strategies for organizations. And when I say organizations, I mean that very broadly. It can be business trying to attract customers. It could also be a nonprofit trying to reach donors and volunteers, get some public attention. It could be the government agency that trying to distribute certain policies, and it could be it could be the university or colleges that trying to recruit students, or just really any organization trying to communicate with its audience in the digital environment. So that is what do I mean by organizations. And the next thing I wanted to talk about is the digital communication strategy. So when we talk about digital strategy, we're not just talking about one single strategy. In fact, organizations communicate with people through many different digital channels, and they have to make many decisions, strategic decisions about what to communicate and where to communicate and how those different pieces work together just in general. We can talk about a lot of strategies involved. So, content strategy, for example, what kind of content an organization should create, what kind of messages that content should communicate, and how that content serves both the audience and the helps to achieve the organizational goals. We need to talk about the platform strategy, so where that content should appear. We have so many different platforms, and you're gonna choose the best platform for your content. Social media strategy, of course, we're going to talk about that. How the organizations can use social platforms strategically rather than just simply posting because they feel like they need to post something on the social media. The partnership strategy, this is like how the organizations can extend their reach by working with other people or other organizations, including people like influencers, content creators, certain communities, and other partners. We're going to talk about search and discovery because creating great content isn't very useful if nobody can find it. So, we're going to think about some of the ways that organizations can make themselves and their content more, I would say, discoverable in the digital environment today. And lastly, we are going to talk about the integrated campaign strategy, which means we are going to bring all these pieces together because, well, in the real world, all these strategies do not operate separately, they operate all together. So, a campaign might involve a website, the social media, digital advertising, different types of partnership, the search, and several different types of content. They all work together and they all work toward the same communication goal. So, these are the digital communication strategies we'll be learning in this class. Okay, let's look at the other part of the course description, knowledge and skills. What I wanted to emphasize here is that the class is not about memorize a list of marketing terms or digital strategy terms. what I wanted you to do in this class is how to make strategic decisions. There are a lot of things we need to really just think about and also practice. The first one is research your brand and its digital environment. Well, this is going to be the topic for our next week. Strategic decisions have to start with research. Research is the very beginning and also the very foundation of your decisions. Before you recommend anything to the organization, you need to really understand the organization itself. You need to really, spend some time to do the research on the organization, on the brands, like what's the brand and the goals, and what is currently, doing online. And how about the competitors? What are they doing? And what is happening in the larger digital environment overall? So you're going to do the research to understand all of this. And then you need to understand your audience. And this is the topic for week 3 and 4. You need to understand who we are trying to reach. You need to learn to research and also define your target audience in a specific way. You don't say things like, oh, our audience is everyone, or our audience is the young people. It's way too broad. The better we understand an audience, the better strategic decisions we can make. From there, we'll need to think about what to communicate. So that is the content strategies. What kind of messages or what kind of content would actually be useful and also interesting and maybe persuasive to the audience. So we need to think about the best content and how to develop the best content for our audience. And we also need to think about the platforms or digital approaches. So the question is, what platform should you focus on? Are you going to focus on TikTok or are you going to focus on YouTube? It's really, it depends. The answer shouldn't simply be, oh, because that platform is popular, TikTok is popular right now, so I'm going to focus on TikTok. That's not enough. Okay, so we want to be able to explain why a particular approach makes sense for the particular audience or the particular goal we need to achieve for the organization. And similarly, the online collaborations. Say if you wanted to collaborate with another brand or maybe an influencer, why you are making that decision? All the decisions should be strategic and you should be able to explain why do you think this type of collaboration can help you to achieve the goal. And eventually, you're going to take all these individual decisions and put them together into the integrated digital campaign. The goal is not to have a collection of unrelated tactics or ideas. The goal is to have different pieces that reinforce one another and also work together toward the same objective. Okay, now if we put everything together, this is, I would say, a basic roadmap for the semester. This is the basic process for building a digital communication strategy. So we're going to start with the research because, as I said, good strategy shouldn't begin with just tactics. We should do a thorough research at the beginning. Before we decided to what to post, what platform to use, and whether we need influencers or digital advertising, we first need to understand the organization and the environment in which the organization operates. So do your research first and then learn your audience, like who are we trying to reach and what do they need and what do they care about and how do they behave online, things like that. Okay, understand your audience. And once we understand the audience, we can begin thinking about the content. And from there, we can think about the platforms and channels. And again, we do not want to choose a platform just because it's popular at this time. The platform should follow the strategy, okay, not the other way around. And finally, we get to integration. So in the real world communication, like I said, all these tactics and strategies, they do not operate independently, but in a more integrated way. Okay, so by the end of the semester, we're going to think about how to bring these different pieces together into a coherent digital communication strategy. Okay, now you have a general idea about what we'll be learning this semester. Let me briefly explain how the class is structured and how we'll work through the material. So the first major component of this class is the lectures. Every week, we'll be focusing on a particular topic in digital communication strategy. And during the lectures, I will be introducing the key concepts, the theories, frameworks, and examples that you need to understand about this topic. And these lectures will provide the foundation for your exams, but most importantly, you will be expected to apply many of these ideas and principles and skills knowledge in your projects throughout the semester. Okay, we'll be do things like learning by doing. And one thing you should know about this class is that we do not have required textbook. Okay, the digital communication changes very, very quickly. So rather than relying on one single textbook, I'm going to draw from a variety of sources, including the online sources. So when there are readings that I think will be useful, I'm just going to post them on the Brackspace. So you can access everything you need to know about this class online. Okay, on the Brackspace. I'm going to rely heavily on the lecture slides, and I want to say lecture slides will not be distributed. That's my rule. I do not I do not share my lecture slides in any class. However, I'm going to provide lecture notes summarizing the key points from the class to support your learning. These lecture notes can help you to review and study, but they are not a substitute for the lecture itself. Okay, so the lecture will also include explanations, the examples, and connections that may not appear in the notes. Okay, so closed book exams. You will have 3 closed book exams throughout the semester, and they are not cumulative. Okay, I repeat, they are not cumulative. So each exam will focus only on the material we've covered during that particular portion of the class. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, I will be providing lecture notes summarizing all these key concepts from our lectures. So you can use the lecture notes to help you study, okay, help you to review and prepare for the exams. So the lecture notes will serve as the primary study guide for the exams. And these exams are closed book, so you will not be able to use your notes and other materials during the exam. And you'll need to understand and remember the major concepts we covered, but I'm not asking you to memorize everything, okay? The most important part here is comprehension. You should be able to recognize concepts and distinguish between them, and most importantly, apply them to examples or situations. All right. In addition to the exams, another major component of this class is the projects. The exams are designed to assess your understanding of the concepts. The projects, on the other hand, are where you can actually apply those concepts and make strategic decisions yourself. So throughout the semester, you will complete 4 projects. Some of these will be individual projects, and others will involve working with a partner or maybe working in a group. Each project will also include a presentation. It could be a short and informal presentation, and it could also be formal presentation with PowerPoint slides. The presentation gives you an opportunity to explain the decisions you've made. So what do you chose to do and why you chose to do it? Okay, give some explanations, and you will also have an opportunity to receive feedback from me and from your classmates. There is one more thing I would like to emphasize because some of these projects will be completed in groups, and for a group project, everyone in the group will normally receive the same grade. And that means the group work needs to be collaborative. Everyone is expected to contribute, and you should distribute the workload as fairly and evenly as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean that everyone should do exactly the same thing. You can definitely divide responsibilities based on your strengths or interests, but everyone should make a meaningful contribution to the project. And finally, here is the grade allocation for this class. So we have 3 exams. Each exam is 100 points. So together that's 300 points. We have 4 projects, and for now I would say each project is 100 points. So that's 400 points altogether, and attendance and participation is another 100 points. So altogether you have 800 points in total for this class. And this is the grading scale we'll be using. Please remember, it is your responsibility to track your grades over the semester. And if you have any questions about grades, please just come talk to me, okay? And grading scale is right here. Oh, by the way, you can find all this information in the course syllabus. And because this is the beginning of the semester, and also because we'll be doing the first 4 weeks asynchronous online, I would encourage you to sit down and use some time to read the class syllabus carefully. It has all the information you need to know about this class. And if you find anything unclear or if you find anything confusing, please email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, there are some other things about this class structure and expectations, but I'm going to save that to the first in-person meeting. Today, I wanted to leave the majority of this class for the actual topic. So the most important thing today we'll be doing is to build a foundation for the rest of the semester. Introduction to digital strategy, that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, before introducing digital strategy, let's talk about digital marketing first. Here I have a very simple definition of marketing in general. In simple terms, marketing is how organizations create interest in their products or services. So when we hear about the word marketing, we often think about, advertising, social media, promotions, or just selling products. But marketing is actually broader than promotion alone. It involves understanding what customers need and want. It also involves creating and communicating values of the organization, and ultimately, it involves developing relationships between organizations and their customers. So, in this semester, we are going to talk about marketing, but don't just think it simply as trying to sell something. Okay, think more broadly about how an organization understands, reaches, and communicates with and create values for its audience. And traditionally, we could make a fairly clear distinction between marketing and digital marketing because in the past, we have the so-called traditional marketing that focuses on television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and direct mail and offline promotions, etc., etc. And digital marketing, on the other hand, would focus on websites, search engines, emails, social media, digital advertising, and so on. But that distinction has become increasingly difficult to maintain today. The digital technologies are now embedded in, I'd say, almost every part of the marketing. Just take a look at this image on the right. Well, you don't need to read all of these names, and you certainly do not need to know all of these technologies. But the point of this image is just to show you how large and complex the digital marketing environment has become today. Organizations today can use digital technologies to do so many things, to understand their audience, to create and to distribute their content, to communicate with their customers, advertise their products and services, to manage customer relationships, to support purchases and maintain relationships after the purchase. So from the very beginning to the very end, the organizations can use digital technologies to achieve all of these. So I would say today, digital marketing is essentially marketing. Okay, it's becoming less and less useful to think of digital marketing as something fancy or as something completely separate from marketing itself. From a customer's perspective, and these are not necessarily separate digital and traditional experiences as well. They are all interactions with the same organization, with the same brand. So that's why we are starting this class here. This is not simply a class about how to use social media platforms or how to use digital tools. In fact, we have this class and we're going to think about those tools as part of the larger organizational strategy. Okay, so before we ask, what should we post on Instagram, or should we advertise it on TikTok or Facebook, we need to really understand the larger marketing and communication context in which those decisions are being made. Okay, so the social media and digital strategies we are learning in this class is within the larger context of digital marketing. Okay, and one of the major ways to understand that larger context is to think about all different places where a customer could see a brand. Let me explain. Okay, so we just talked about marketing as a way organizations create interest in their products and services. But marketing doesn't happen through one single message or one single interaction. Usually, a customer goes through a process before deciding to purchase something, and we call this process the customer journey. The customer journey is a cognitive and behavior process a customer goes through as they recognize a need or desire, learn about possible solutions, evaluate options, and eventually make a decision. And one of the oldest and simplest ways to think about this process is the AIDA model. So AIDA represents 4 stages: awareness, interest, desire, and action. So firstly, we have the awareness. The customer has to become aware of the product, the service, or brand. And then something has to capture their interest and make them want to learn more about this product. And then the customer begins to see the product or service as something they may actually want or need, and that is the desire. And finally, the customer takes an action such as making the purchase, signing up, donating, or contacting the organization. So that is the action stage. So the AIDA model is very straightforward and clear, but it's not perfect. Actually, it has several problems. The first problem is that the AIDA model makes the customer journey look very linear. The awareness, interest, desire, and action stages, it's a very linear pathway. In reality, people can do a lot of things all together, and the process can be way more complex. People could move back and forth between different stages. People could even skip stages, from awareness directly to the action stage. People could stop and return later, and people could spend a long time comparing multiple alternatives. And it's just way more complex than the linear process. So, for example, okay, I would like you to think about the last time you bought something relatively expensive. For example, a laptop or maybe an iPad. Well, you probably didn't simply become aware of one laptop, became interested, desire it, and buy it. You probably didn't go through this very linear process. You may have searched Google, okay? You may have watched reviews, several review videos on YouTube or any other platforms. You could compare products, okay, different options. You might ask your friends for recommendations. You probably have visited the store for several times and then go back online and change your mind several times as well. So this is way more complex, okay? It's I would say much messier than the AIDA funnel suggests. So that's the first problem. It's way too simple. And secondly, the traditional AIDA essentially ends with action. Okay, so as you can see here, the action is the very last stage. Okay, so it seems like, okay, once the people have purchased their products and the entire model is done there. Okay, in marketing, we often interpret the action as purchase, and we see this is a final step. However, organizations care about what happens after the purchase as well. Okay, post-purchase actions also matter. So the customers may use and evaluate the products. They may contact customer service for certain questions. They may leave reviews online. They could make repeat purchases as well. And they might recommend the brand to other people if they really like it. Or they could even share negative experiences on social media, which is absolutely what you do not want. So, from a relationship perspective, the purchase isn't necessarily the end of the customer journey. In many cases, it is the beginning of another stage of the relationship. So that's the second limitation of the model. And third, the AIDA was developed long before today's digital media environment. It was developed back to I don't remember exactly, but like 1980s or 1970s or something. So it was very old, okay? So the model doesn't fully capture what happens when customers have access to so many different channels and resources of the information today. So the customers today can actively search for the information online. They can read reviews from other customers. They can interact directly with the brand, and they can encounter the contents across multiple platforms. For example, you see so many different ads on social media today. And they can also influence other people's customer journeys as well. So I would say, just in other words, customers today are not simply moving through a funnel when just like the model suggests. Okay, the organization sent message to them, but that's not all the messages they received, all the information they received about the brand. The customers today are the active participants in the communication process. Okay, so if the customer journey doesn't look like a simple funnel, then what does it actually look like? Well, it might look something more like this. A customer could firstly hear about the brand from a friend and see it again on Instagram, and then search for the brand online, visit the company's website. And after a few days, they see the ad again and they watch a influencer talk about the product and eventually visit the physical store before making the purchase. So this is just one possible journey for the customer. Another customer could take a completely different path. The important point here is that along the way, the customer is interacting with the brand or the information about the brand again and again. And all these points of interaction is what we call the touch points. Okay, touch point. This is another major concept I would like to introduce today. What is touch point? Well, a touch point is any interaction or point of contact between the customer and the brand. Touch points occur throughout the customer journey and can influence how customers think, feel, and act toward the brand. Touch points can take many different forms. The customers may encounter a brand through many different channels like websites or social media, the advertisement, the email, the search engines, the online reviews. They might also hear it from a friend, in their real life, or maybe an influencer on social media. They could also see or just encounter the brand in the physical stores or from customer service. Some touch points are directly controlled by the organizations, but some others are not. And something I wanted to just clarify here is the touch point is not a channel. Okay, so these are the two different things. A channel is where communication or interaction occurs. In fact, we're going to talk about the channel later today. A touch point, however, is a specific interaction a customer has with a brand throughout the through the channel. So, for example, Instagram or social media in general is a channel, and seeing a brand's Instagram post, that is the touch point. Okay, so the touch point refers to the specific interaction right here. The brand's website is a channel, but visiting the product's page on the brand's website is the touch point. Okay, so there's a difference between touch point and channel. The point here is touch point is very important because every touch point shapes the brand's experience. Customers rarely form an impression of a brand from a single interaction. Instead, their overall perceptions develops from the combined experience of multiple touch points, and each interaction matters here. Okay, each interaction can strengthen or weaken the customer's relationship, the consumer's relationship with your brand. So organizations really need to think about, I would say, think beyond individual message or individual platform. It's not just one ad or it's not just one social media platform. The effective digital strategy requires considering how different touch points work together to create the overall customer experience. Okay, so not all touch points come from the same source or they are equally controlled or designed by the organization. We can generally divide touch points into four categories based on who creates or influences the interaction. And we're going to start with the company created touch points because this is the type of touch points where the organizations have the most direct control over. Okay, so company created touch points. Well, they are the planned and they're the touch points that are planned and produced by the organization as part of its marketing communication efforts. The examples could include advertising, the company's website, the brand social media accounts, I mean the official accounts, the official social media accounts for the brand, and also something physical like the product packaging, like the direct email marketing, sometimes in-store displays. Okay, so all of these are the company created touch points because they are directly controlled and created by the company. These are the intentional communications designed to influence how the consumers think or feel or act toward the brand. And the company has 100% control over of these touch points. So the key characteristic here is control. The organization can basically decides, what kind of message to communicate, the information to be communicated, how the message looks and sounds, where and when it appears, and which audience is designed to reach. And because of this control, the company created touch points make up a major part of an organization's planned marketing communication. So this is the major, I would say, the main portion of the communication efforts of the company. So the example, well, the image I have here is the Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola controls the message, the image, the branding, and the placement of the advertisement. And when a consumer sees the ad, it becomes one touch point in that consumer's overall experience with Coca-Cola. So you see Coca-Cola on the screen, and that is a touch point. Okay, so the next category is the intrinsic touch points. These are the interactions that occur naturally as customers purchase a product or use a service. They are not separate promotional messages. They are a part of the actual customer experiences. For example, if you wanted to know certain information about a brand, you might visit a company's website. And if you are in the store, you might just go and talk with a salesperson. And sometimes after the purchase, you had certain questions, and then you are going to interact with a customer service. So all of these, they are the intrinsic touch points, and the distinction between the company created touch points and intrinsic touch point is that the role of the interaction is different. So a company created touch point is intentionally created to communicate or to just promote. For example, the Coca-Cola television commercial we just saw before. The intrinsic touch point occurs because the customer is actually interacting with the organization or the brand. For example, like talking with a salesperson while deciding what to buy, just like the image. So because of that, the company do not always have complete control over these interactions. For example, the company may design a brand promise, but the actual experience may depend on the customer service representative or the product quality or the store experience in general. Of course, the organizations can still like design or train the representatives or just manage the store display, try to make all this experience and make them more consistent with the brand. But the point here is intrinsic touch points can be especially powerful because the consumers are experiencing the brand directly, okay, rather than just receiving a promotional message or seeing an ad. They are literally experiencing it. A great advertisement may create expectations, but the actual customer experience determines whether those expectations are fulfilled. So what the company says about itself and what customers actually experience in store should be consistent. Okay, let's talk about unexpected touch points. Unexpected touchpoints are unplanned encounters with a brand that often come from sources outside of the organization. The examples include word of mouth, the online reviews, the media stories, the various social media posts, and consumer created content. And because of that, organizations have much less control over what is communicated here. So the example I'm going to give you is a viral post on TikTok a couple of years ago. If you still remember, a consumer posted a TikTok video showing her Stanley tumbler survived from the car fire. As you can see from the image, much of the car has been destroyed from the fire, but the cup survived, and it even had ice inside of the tumbler. So it was the video went viral immediately, and it went crazy. It generated enormous attention for Stanley, the brand. And the Stanley didn't plan for the Stanley didn't plan the event, and it didn't create the original content, but it became a organic touch point from social media sharing, and the company responded afterwards. I think the CEO promised to buy the lady a new car as a present. But the company basically used this unexpected attention for further engage with the consumer and for the broader audience. And this is unexpected touch points. They can strongly influence consumer because the information often comes from independent third parties rather than directly from the company. So the consumers may perceive these sources as more authentic or credible than the traditional advertising. In the past, an unexpected brand experience might have been just shared with a few friends or maybe within a small social circle, word of mouth, right? But we are having social media today. Social media allows one consumer's experience to reach millions of people and make it extremely powerful. Organizations cannot control every touch points, but this situation requires organizations to monitor, to respond, and sometimes amplify the unexpected touch points like this. So that means digital strategy involves not only creating communication, okay, but also always being prepared to respond to communication that is created by other people. Well, last but not least, we have customer-initiated touch points. These are the touch points occur when customers actively reach out and interact with an organization. So the interaction begins with the customer, not the company. The examples could include asking a question, making a complaint, sending a direct message, calling the customer service, or commenting on or replying to the brand on social media. The key distinction here is who initiates the communication. The organization may not know when or why a customer reached out, but once the interaction begins, the organization has the opportunity to influence the customer's experience through its response. For example, I have a conversation on social media here. So as you can see, the customer commented on the brand on social media because of apparently there's a problem with the order. And the customer initiated the interaction and the brand responded. Then the brand's response became another touch point. And you can notice that, from the conversation, The consumer was also dissatisfied with how long it took the company to respond. And this reminds us that how a company responds is part of the brand experience. The consumers often initiate the communication because they either need something from the company or they have a problem. So these can be particularly important moments in the customer experience. And a poor or delayed response can damage the relationship between the brand and the consumer. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick summary here. We have looked at the four types of touch points, and now we can compare them along two dimensions. The impact, so how much impact the touch point may have on the consumers, and the control, which is how much control or how much influence the organization has on the touch points. I would say in general, there can be a trade off between control and potential impact. We have company created touch points, which gives organizations the greatest degree of control. However, consumers know that these messages come directly from the company, so they may sometimes be less influential than the information based on the direct experience or from an independent source. Intrinsic touch points and consumer initiated touch points, with these two types of touch points, the organizations can have less control over when and why the interaction begins. They can design and influence the experience on a certain level, but they cannot completely control how each interaction unfolds. So, in both cases, the consumer is more actively involved in the experience. Well, unexpected touch points is the one that the organization has the lowest control over, but it can potentially has the highest impact because, as I said before, they come from more independent, or maybe at least people consider they come from a more authentic source. And because of that, they can sometimes have a very strong influence on consumers. Not necessarily positive, it could be negative as well, but yes, it can be extremely powerful. It can have a strong influence on consumers overall. So organizations cannot control every touch point, but as I said before, every touch point matters. Every touch point can contribute to the consumer's overall perception of the brand. So the strategic challenge here is not simply to create more messages, it is to make many parts of the consumer's experience work together as effectively as possible. And that means we need to really think about all the possible channels that consumers might encounter our brand. So, where do these touch points really happen, and where does the brand actually communicate with the consumer? The answer is media. All right. We're going to spend the entire semester talking about media. Uh, what I'm going to give you here is just a overall, okay, a overall map, or just the overall understanding of the type of media we'll be talking about in this class. I would say we can understand the modern media environment by dividing it into three broad categories: the paid media, the owned media, and the earned media. So that is the poem we're talking about. So, paid media refers to the exposure that the organization pays to get. Okay, so the organization pays another party for access to an audience, or placement for its message. Like, well, the examples I have here, they're only for the digital strategies, and these are the specific strategies we'll be discovering in the class. later this semester. So we have like paid search, display advertising, the sponsored social media content, the paid influencer partnerships, things like that. These are the paid media, which means the attention is amplified by payment. Okay, so you're gonna pay for the attention. Now, owned media refers to the communication channels or the digital properties that the organization owns or directly controls. So here we're talking about the company's website, the mobile apps of certain brands, the brand social media accounts. So the owned media basically gave the organizations, I would say, substantial control over about what they communicate and how they present the brand. So that is the owned media. And the next category is the earned media, and this is the exposure generated when other people or organizations talk about or just cover your brand. So you didn't pay for that, okay? You earned it. The organization does not directly purchase that exposure. It comes from either the news coverage, word of mouth, online reviews, or just in general the user generated content. So earned media generally offer the organizations less control, but it can carry strong credibility. So modern organizations communicate through the media ecosystem, not through one isolated channel. Some media they pay for, some they control, and some they must earn. Effective digital strategy requires understanding how these different forms of media can work together. So, as you can see here, the paid, owned, and earned media, they are not always completely separate. There are overlaps, okay? There are overlaps. For example, a company, let's say, publishes something, okay, publishes a post on its TikTok, okay, so that is the owned media because they own the TikTok account, they posted something on TikTok, and the company pays to promote that particular TikTok video. So it becomes what? A combination of paid media and owned media, right? And consumers begin sharing and discussing this particular video post, and this is an user generated content. This is like this is more like a organic discussion. So, and that part of communication is earned, so it becomes a earned media, right? So yeah, like I said, they are not completely separate, there are overlaps. Oh, another thing I want to talk about is please make a distinction between touch point and media. You can see there are some kind of overlaps or some kind of like very similar things, but they are not the same thing. Okay, so the touch points describes the interaction. Okay, so how does the consumer encounter or interact with the brand? We're talking about that particular interaction, but poem. We have the poem here, the media ecosystem here. It describes the media relationships. So who owns the media, who pays for the exposure, and who generates that exposure. So the two frameworks overlap, but they are not the same thing. Okay, they are not the same concept. Alright, so we have just talked about the owned, paid, and earned media. In reality, organizations usually use all three at the same time. And customers may encounter a brand through the ad or by visiting its website or seeing an influencer post. Well, from the customer's perspective, these are not necessarily separate communication activities. Together, they shape the overall perceptions of the brand. So, this brings us to a very important concept, which is called integrated marketing communication, or IMC. Basically, you could Consider AMC as different forms of communication linked together and work in harmony. In other words, advertising should not say one thing while social media says something completely different, and the website communicates another different message. So the different channels, different media channels may use different content and format, but they should support the same broader strategy and the brand experience. And integration here does not mean posting exactly the same message everywhere. Different media platforms have different audience, purposes, and conventions. The content can change from one channel to another channel. What should remain consistent here is the overall strategic direction, the brand identity, and the core message. So, yeah, the integrated marketing communication, I have one more slide for it. So, IMC asked us to take a big picture view of communication. Traditionally, people may think marketing communication means advertising, PR, social media, promotions, and so on. But customers form impressions of a brand through all many different touch points, as we described before. So, this requires the organizations to coordinate all the communication functions. So different teams or different departments within the company need to work together. Advertising may be handled by marketing, media relations by PR, social medias by another team, and customer service still is a different department. I mean, that's how the company is structured usually, right? But if these groups operate independently, the customers may receive inconsistent or even contradictory messages. So IMC here basically requires all these functions to communicate and coordinate with one another. So MC is really about connecting these pieces all together. We have many touch points, many media channels, and many people within the organization creating the communication. The challenge here is to make sure all of these pieces work together toward the same goal. So back to this class, over the semester, we're going to break digital strategy into different pieces. We're going to talk about content strategy, social media strategy, platform strategy, partnership and influencers, digital advertising, search and discovery, and several other approaches. We separate them because we need to understand how each one works. But in real world, please remember they do not operate separately. A business doesn't have a social media goal just for the sake of having a social media goal. It doesn't run digital ads just because digital advertising exists. And it doesn't work with influencers simply because influencers marketing is popular today. These are all different tools and approaches that an organization can use to communicate with its audience. And this brings us back to the MC. Ultimately, the different digital strategies we study should fit into the larger integrated communication strategy. They should work together to create a coherent experience for the audience and, most importantly, help the organization accomplish its broader goals. All right, that's everything for our first class. Today was really just about building a foundation for the rest of the class. We looked at how the digital communication fits into the broader marketing environment and how customers interact with organizations through different touch points and media, and why those different communication activities ultimately need to work together as part of the integrated strategy. So, starting with next week, we are going to gradually move from this big picture into the individual components of building a digital communication strategy. And the very first step is research. before we can decide what content to create, which platforms we can use, or what kind of digital strategies might work, we firstly need to understand the organization and also the environment in which the organization operates. So we are going to start by looking at how to research the organization itself, these competitors, and also the broader industry or the broader environment. So that research will give us the foundation we need to know about, and all the information we need to know to make informed strategic decision in this process. So that's where we're going to pick up next time. Thank you everyone for your flexibility, for your understanding, and for your attention. If you have any questions regarding the class or any questions in general, feel free to email me and I'm going to respond as quickly as I can. All right. I hope everything goes well at the first week of the semester. I will see you next week.